Another really important thing you need to know when working with fractions is how to simplify or to reduce them. So we're going to look at a similar fraction that we've seen already today, and that would be 8/16. Here it is represented in a model. Now I know that this fraction is not simplified because they're still sharing more than one factor. When a fraction is in simplest form, this means the numerator and denominator have only one as a common factor. And from what we know about factors, factors are numbers that can be multiplied by another number to get a product. So what I need to do is say, when I look at this fraction, 8/16, what are some common factors that they have? Well, I know that 8 is a factor of 16. So I'm going to start by dividing the top and the bottom number by 8. So here's 8/16. And I'm going to divide whatever I do to the top, I have to do to the bottom. So I divide 8 by 8, and I divide 16 by 8. 8 divided by 8 is 1. 16 divided by 8 is 2. To reduce 8/16, we end up with 1/2. I know this is true because when I look at the model, 8 out of 16 is half of all of the whole 16 pieces of this. So to simplify, you need to be able to look at the numerator and the denominator and be sure that there's no more than one common factor between the two. Now that I have 1 as my numerator, since I made it a unit fraction, now I know that this is as simplified as it's going to get. I'm having a little trouble writing here, but that's okay. Now that 1/2 is simplified, so we've reduced it successfully. We're going to be talking about multiplying fractions, and there's some big ideas that we need to go over first. You need to understand that there's 3 different properties that will help making multiplication of fractions easier. And the first one is down here. And that is when you multiply a fraction, multiply a number by a fraction that is equal to 1, the product is equal to the given number. And we call that the multiplicative identity property of 1. Okay? Secondly, there are 2 other ideas. When you multiply a number by a fraction that's greater than 1, the product will be greater than that number. The third final one is if you multiply a number by a fraction that is less than 1, then the product will be less than the given number. And you'll see that when we do some modeling with these, it really helps to understand what is happening. Okay? Let's start with talking about multiplying a fraction by a fraction. So when we do this, it's much simpler than you would think. All you have to do is multiply the numerator by the numerator and the denominator by the denominator. It will get a little tricky when you have to do some reducing or something else. So let's take a look at an example here. Say we had 2/3 times 1/2. All I need to do is multiply 2 times 1 and 3 times 2. My product then would be 2/6. We'll get into reducing a little later, but what I do know is that 2 is a factor of 6, so I know that this fraction is not yet reduced. I would then divide the top and the bottom by 2 to get an answer of 1/3. So 2/3 times 1/2 is 1/3. Something else we could do is we can make a model to represent that. So we're going to make thirds over here, and then we'll make a half here. When we multiply fractions, we think of it too that we're talking about the multiplication sign as an of. What is 2/3 of 1/2? Okay? So we have 2/3 multiplied by 1/2. And then what we get is, let me get my tool here, 2/3 times a half gives me the 2/6 on the top, which reduces to 1/3. Something else you'll need to know how to do is to multiply whole numbers by fractions or mixed numbers, and vice versa, multiplying a mixed number or fraction by a whole number. So we're going to take a look at this right now. First of all, it's good to see what your numbers are and compare them to 1. Okay, so for example, if we had 8 times, let's go with 2.5. Well, I know that 8 is greater than 1 and 2.5 is greater than 1, so the product is going to be greater than the whole number factor, which is 8. The new product is going to be much larger than that. Okay, so what I have to do here is I can leave 8 as it is. When you have a whole number, it helps to put it over 1 so that you have a numerator and denominator. But we have some work to do with 2.5. We need to convert that to a mixed number. It is a mixed number. We need to convert it to an improper fraction, so all we have is a numerator and denominator. Now to do that, I multiply the whole number 2 by the denominator 2. 2 times 2 is 4. And you add the numerator. 4 plus 1 is 5. Now we're going to be multiplying 8 by 5 halves. The denominator stays the same here. Now to multiply, like we learned before, you just multiply across the top and across the bottom. 8 times 5 is 40. 1 times 2 is 2. Now, multiplication and division are inverse operations, so now our improper fraction is 40 halves, which is the same as 40 divided by 2. Our new product here would be 20. If we look down here, mixed numbers, like we did, need to be converted to an improper fraction. When a mixed number is multiplied by a fraction less than 1, the product is less than the mixed number. But in this case, 2.5 was greater than 1, so our product was greater than 8, the factor that we started with. The last thing we're going to talk about is multiplying a fraction by a whole number and modeling it. We can also multiply a whole number by a fraction. The models will look a little different, and I'll explain why. So for example, say we had a problem where I'll say myself, I drank 2/3 of a quart of iced tea each day for 5 days. So I'm going to make 5 quarts. 2, 3, 4, 5. Oops. Here's 2. Here's 3, 4, and 5. And I want to divide each of those quarts into thirds. I know they're not perfectly equal, but that's okay for this purpose. And what we want to find out is how much iced tea, how many quarts of iced tea I drank during that week. So there's 1, 2/3, 2/3, 2/3, 2/3, 2/3. So what we're representing here is not that line. What we're representing here is 2/3 of a quart times 5 days. In order to do this, we're going to multiply numerator by numerator, denominator by denominator. So we know, by looking at this model, we have 2/3, 4/3, 6/3, 8/3, 10/3. We can't leave 10/3 as it is because that's an improper fraction. So what we do is we divide. And 10/3 is the same as 3 and 1/3 quarts that we drank.